Today's young adults have crossed into an age of rapid change, change that is faster than for any previous generation. Access to knowledge is immediate and vast. Connections wait ready at their fingertips. They bridge to a global community in an instant. But neither technology, nor education, nor relationships have delivered personal significance or a sense of belonging. Times have changed. The last thing one would expect of young adults in a connected world are feelings of disconnection and isolation. They are desperate for someone to believe in them. They long for authentic love. Those who study this unsettled generation tell us there are reasons they build barriers. There are reasons they feel vulnerable.
Kids are so desperate for an authentic relationship without an agenda. This is the greatest day, in a sense, for parents to actually step up and be parents.
One way we are deceiving ourselves in our online friendships is that for some of us, it starts feeling like it's enough to have 500 or 600 Facebook friends, that we're social enough and that we have enough of a support system. And I think that's a big deception. It's not unusual in my experience as a professor and as a doctor to see students or young patients who may have 500 or 600 Facebook friends, but who feel incredibly lonely. And I think that's the deception that's at work there, that they feel that they have the sustenance and the support that they need because of their very active virtual life, when in reality, they don't.
Here's what technology has given to kids. It's given them the ability to more effectively hide even from themselves. There's how kids gather in social relationships now, once their brain moves from child to adult, right around 14, is they move into social relationships in what are called clusters. A guy named Donald Pasterski in Canada came up with that years ago. A cluster is different than a clique that most adults went through. A clique is a friendship group where you draw boundaries around yourself. Most kids are relatively savvy about who really is a friend and who's not. They grab onto each other. How kids build friendships from 14 to 20 is they build them according to the safest common denominator. They find their friends according to who is most like them. And then they grab onto those friends, usually somewhere between 14 and 16, and those become their cluster for the next several years. A cluster's different. In the last probably 15 to 20 years, that's how adolescents, mid-adolescents, 14 to 20, have had friendships, where they still link arms, but they link arms back to back instead of face to face. Because the purpose of a cluster is I need you to watch my back, the idea of a wingman. And that's how kids' friendships are to 14 to 20, but there's certain rules to the cluster. You can't bring the cluster down, so you can't talk about your family with your cluster. Your parents, you're getting verbally abused at home. You can't bring that up the cluster. You get date raped. You can't bring that up to the cluster. You overdrink, or you're worried about your drinking too much, maybe you have an addiction. You can't bring that up to your cluster. Because the rules are, we're in this to protect each other. So therefore, they're not even, this is where kids push back on me often, unless they're in a group that they really feel safe. If it's one-on-one, sometimes they go, oh, no, my friends are my favorite people. In fact, the only people that know me are my friends. Parents are so offended by that. But they'll fight for the integrity of that cluster. Here's the problem, is they can't violate the rules. So therefore, they're not really friendships by an adult definition of friendships. An adult definition of friendship, whether it's a James Taylor song, Carole King, from the early 70s, or whether it's a song even from the 80s, friendships were about this loyalty, this sacrificing for my friend, this someone's always there for me. Those themes have greatly diminished and actually been fallen off the map. When you can have your friendships in these sound bites known as text messages, and a lot of kids will do 300, 400 text messages a day. But a friendship that does not make. A lot of us adults do texting as well, either to avoid a conversation with acquaintance, if we're really honest. We wish we could do texting, you know, with bank tellers and waitresses sometimes. I'll text you my order. I really don't want to talk to you, okay? When you do it with your spouse, it's for just a quick thing. But if all you did was go home and then text your spouse, be in big trouble. Nobody'd get married, for one thing. Romantic relationships demand the face-to-face. That's when kids move into that. As they move into more abstract abilities, for some kids 18, 19, 20, for some kids 22, 25, they much prefer face-to-face. They much prefer social engagement. This is why the club scene is huge when you're 23 to 30 and single. It's cheers. It's cheers in a totally different way. It's not just the kind of the lonely people. It's everybody. But when you're 14 to 20, Facebook, text messaging, any kind of technological way to maintain a sense of self and belonging that is not intimate and does not cost me, that's why I do that. Parents are not in the game. No adults, by the way, are in the game, so it further removes kids from the lack of social capital. So what adults say to all my stuff is, it's the kids' fault. Those kids are disrespectful. Those kids won't talk to me. I don't have any idea how to talk to my 15-year-old daughter. Well, your 15-year-old daughter is dying for you to have a conversation with her, but you got a lot of work to do. And she doesn't want your text messages. And sending her a little email is nice, but it feeds into the superficial nature of controlled relationships. And that's not at the core what any kid really wants.
When a lot of adults feel pushed back and stiff-armed by teenagers, what I've observed is that teenagers feel a profound weight and a burden of developing their own identity because they've been hurt by adult figures and by systems and by people that put expectations on them as a criteria for acceptance. They push back against relationships built on that's so performance-based. But the truth is they're desperate for help. They're desperate for mentors, for people who can give them tips about life and say, hey, here's how you get scholarships. Here's how you handle conflict. Like when you're feeling angry and you're so angry, you just want to punch anything. You will tear someone apart that 10 minutes ago was your friend because of the anger you feel. Like here's how you handle that. And they don't know how to handle that. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. They got arrested for a fight, and he was baffled at how he could become this person in a split second that was willing to beat a guy's face in that he's friends with. And so he's trying to figure out, how do I become someone that doesn't betray myself and other people when I have a rise of emotion like that? And so at the end of the day, I think actually they're longing for mentors and people who can show them what that path can look like.
One of the things that I know and I feel very passionate about is that my mom did a great job raising me. Now, even though she did the greatest job that she could, I was still lacking male influences in my life. And so what happened, because my mom did the very best that she could, I still needed, there was a coach that came into my life. And that coach began to enter into my relationship and began to say, Chancey, I believe in you. And he made me feel like a champion because he was a dad that I didn't have. And my mother told this coach, man, I need Keith to have someone else in his life. And she helped this coach get into my life and begin to help me become a better athlete. Because my mom couldn't help me to be a better football player. She didn't even know how to play football. But this coach did. He came alongside. Along the way, my mother, although she didn't have a husband, she was constantly getting involved with other people in my life. You know, she knew my coaches, she knew my teachers, she knew, and when I got into junior high, those coaches, high school, she was always involved in other people, and she helped me to understand other people in the community. She introduced me to neighbors who had husbands, who had that were airplane pilots, that were lawyers, that were doctors, that began to influence me to have a hope that, you know what, I could do this. I could become great, even though I've been born into a pretty tough environment. Her influence of pointing me to other people was absolutely monumental in my life, because she did something that she could not have done alone. It took a lot of people to kind of raise me, and she did it the best that she could. And in families today, what we're seeing is that we're trying to do it ourselves, but you know, we can utilize the resources around us. I think one of the most incredible things that I can do as a dad to my kids is introduce them to other people. People that have, like my son wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, to introduce him to people that had that same desire. Pilots, doctors, businessmen that have had success, and let him begin to make some desires of what he wants to accomplish in life. So what can we do as a community to help these kids? Get to know them. You know, befriend kids in the community on the football team. If you're a parent out there that has one, get involved in Big Brothers, Big Sisters, anything you can. Get involved in some organization, get involved in a church, get involved in your school to help tutor. Some way to invest in these kids that can begin to be someone that is a voice into their life that says, you're okay.
The community context for a teenager has tremendous value, and there are a lot of roles that a person who's not a parent can uniquely play in a teenager's life. And the fact that I'm not a parent or an uncle or a relative to these high school students that I spend time with, I think in many ways makes me a safe place, because a ton of what a teenager feels toward their family is not just the conflict and the frustration. They feel a deep sense of loyalty. And so when a coach is talking to one of his players, and I've seen this happen a number of times, and says, hey, I can tell this is a tough time for you. You know, and you're working hard on the field, and I see that, and I'm proud of you for that, and I just want you to know that. And you know, how's your week been? What's your week been like? And just kind of an open question like that. Sometimes a player, a football player or a student will open up in a way that they might not feel free to toward a parent. And it's not really about you know, gossiping about in-house issues. It's more that if they're really struggling with their home life, they may not feel the freedom or have the ability to talk to a parent directly and share the nuanced idea that I'm not being disrespectful, but it's been tough to be here recently, and I'm trying to figure out how we can work on our relationship. I mean, that's a tough thing to express to the person you're having an issue with. And conflict, and handling conflict well, is a tough thing. So someone who's in the community who can be there as just a very agenda-free person who's just a fan of this student's life and wants to cheer them on in their academics and say, I think you could do this. You are college material. You could get a great job. You could really do well in life. But even if you don't go to college, I'm still a fan. You know, that's a valuable thing, because it's a free gift of love.
The identity thing that kids are going through today is one that they feel overboard. And the life buoy, so to speak, that's being thrown to them is just hitting them on the head, because they're not even reaching for it. They feel so lost, and their identity is so messed up in their eating disorders. There could be drugs, there's sex, there's every type of addiction in the world that they could have fallen into, and they really are comfortable in that. They want to be out, but they're so far from even asking the question, in my identity, in my situation, I don't think I can be healed. And what it takes is it takes a very conscious effort of us as parents and probably people that really believe a lot in just this generation to reach out a hand and say, how can I help you? And believe in them. And I know I've said this a lot. To believe them doesn't mean that I just say that. It says, let me help you. That I will come alongside and I will meet with you every Friday morning at 6 a.m. I will come pick you up. I will pick you up from school at this day and I'll spend an hour, 2 hours with you. I'm going to help you out of this. I will get you connected with a Celebrate Recovery program. I will get you connected to something that will help you through this. But I will walk you through it. And I've got my notebook and I've got my pen and I'm writing down exactly what it is that can help. And I'm showing them how I can purposely help them. What kids really want is they want to be affirmed. They want someone to come alongside to help them, okay? Now, what we as a parent do is we will critique them, we will discipline them, and sometimes when we do that, they build a wall. And the wall is because they feel like they're not worthy, they feel like they're not valued, and maybe we missed it. And maybe they missed why we were saying what we said. It's a problem between the both of us. It's the great art of communication. And so rather than let the wall be there, I would say we need to back up and just re-ask the question. When you see barriers set up, what we want to do is rather than let it shut us down or walk away or slam a door, let's say, I'm sorry. Can I say this again? You know, I'm sorry that I made you so upset. Will you accept your dad's apology? Most kids will tell you they've never heard their dad once say, I'm sorry, much less ask for their apology. And so what I see is that in this, once again, we got to go back to this generation. It's a very connected, their text messaging, their communication skills are limited at best. And because of that, if we're not doing a great job of communicating, they're going to treat us just like a text. Short answers, done, I'm out of here. And so what we've got to do is keep asking questions until we get them to open up.
And so beneath that gut desire for belonging and for a relational connection that I see as being primarily behind not just these changing behaviors, but also drug use and partying, this idea to be a part of a scene. I think that the core issue beneath that is a deficit in the average teenager's sense of value and belonging and connectedness and rootedness in a relationship where there's unconditional love. And people talk about unconditional love a lot, and it becomes this idea that we think is common and it's easy to express or it's easy to define, but it's actually, I think, becoming very rare in a teenager's world. And without unconditional love, in a sense that there's someone in my life who loves me and cares for me and spends time with me and is fun to be around consistently, regardless of whether I play games with meeting their expectations. That's the most valuable thing of all for teenagers, and it's very rare.
I tend to tell parents to be understanding that life is complicated for your children. Be understanding. Quit using the bumper sticker dismissive statements. When I was a kid, the world's changed. Secondly, out of understanding, demonstrate compassion toward your child in every situation, good or bad. Your default is understanding and compassion. Compassion is more than I love my kid. Of course you do. Compassion comes from two Latin words, cum pati. It means to suffer with another. Cum, communal, community, communion. Pati, the passion. Compassion means I feel the pain that you feel as you move through adolescence. It's not to lose our cool, not to get mad, not to write them off, but it is our job to boundary their life experience. And that's why parents need to be in community with each other. Parents need to collectively surround not only their children, but a bunch of other kids. Adults have to figure out how to come together as adults figured out for many, many centuries in every single culture. We got to recapture this communal commitment to children, because a mom and dad or a mom and stepdad do not have the power on their own to figure out what's an appropriate boundary for my child when they're 12, 14, 21. But boundaries are where we negotiate with our kids, where we give them a sense of power but not give them the whole store, where the consequences also, the kid understands the consequences related to the boundary. In other words, reasonably realize that parenting is about training them for adulthood, not about punishing them or shaming them. Most parents, the only way we deal with our kids is punishment and shame. And it's the opposite of what works.
To be so focused on rules and performance and teaching and training your children, whether that's from a faith perspective or just a pragmatic view of maturity in life, that you begin to think that your approval and your relationship and your friendship with your child really should be earned. It should be the result of correct behavior. And parents might actually even use the phrase, I would never want to go out and have fun with my child after they've turned in a report card with 2 Fs and a couple Cs, and after I've caught them sneaking out and all these different kinds of things, and their behavior this past month has been deplorable. So how could I just say, hey, this Saturday we're gonna go have fun together. We're gonna go out and get ice cream, and this weekend we're gonna go camping. They say I would never want to reward bad behavior. But actually, consequences and discipline and punishment are very different. And so if a child is misbehaving and you put them in the doghouse for a few weeks, what I've seen and just observed in teenagers' lives is that doesn't communicate that behaviors are unacceptable. That communicates that these teenagers are unacceptable. And they register a sense of personal, fundamental rejection. And I've talked to students who were very open about the mistakes they've made. One guy came to me and said, this week I got caught smoking pot, and I was cut in school, and I got in a fight, and I'm grounded. And he's talking about all these different things that were happening as consequences, which in the way he was talking about it, you could tell that he knew it was fair. But then he started talking about how angry he was at his mom and how he was just ticked at her. And the thing that he honed in on was the fact that she just wouldn't talk to him. And there was this cold barrier of silence between them that had grown up after the consequences, after they talked through his behaviors. And you could tell that what he longed for was the ability to still connect with her in spite of his poor behaviors. And so in that context, I think she would have been very welcome both to toe the line on consequences for wrong behavior, and then still to say, but I love you like crazy, and I want to spend time with you this week, and maybe we could do something fun together.